So students, you have learnt some of the topics already now in this lesson, human reproduction, that is human reproductive system, male and female, then gametogenesis, in that spermatogenesis, that is production of sperm, and oogenesis, production of ova. And next you have read about structure of sperm and ovum. Then now we are going to see two topics, that is menstrual cycle and fertilization and implantation. So first we will go to menstrual cycle. This menstrual cycle is otherwise called as ovarian cycle. Why it is called ovarian cycle is the cyclic changes that takes place in the ovary is that is why it is called as ovarian cycle. So it does not include only ovary, it includes uterus also. That is what is called as ovarian cycle or menstrual cycle. So first we should know what is menstrual cycle. The cycle of events starting from one menstrual period till the next one. So cycle of events starting means there are many processes or many changes that takes place from one menstrual cycle to the next menstrual cycle. Those cyclic events or the process that takes place during that cycle is called as menstrual cycle. So we will see what are those events that takes place. So next one, when does it occur? So when does it occur? Normally if you see, when a healthy lady or a healthy woman, she gets the menstrual cycle for every 28 to 29 days during the reproductive life of the female. So this starts from menarche to menopause. Menarche is nothing but the first menses or the puberty. Next one up to menopause. So except during pregnancy period, from menarche or puberty to menopause, the female, if that female has a healthy reproductive life, then this cycle occurs once in every 28 to 29 days. So this is called a cyclic menstruation. This cyclic menstruation indicates a normal reproductive phase. So when that cycle is not normal, that is when it does not occur for every 28 to 29 days, then it shows that the reproductive or the normal reproductive phase is not seen there, or you can say it's an abnormal reproductive phase. Okay, next one we are going to see certain phases of menstrual cycle. So there are four phases. One is called menstrual phase. Second one is called as follicular or proliferative phase. Third one is ovulatory, and the fourth one is luteal or secretory phase. So there are four phases: menstrual, follicular, ovulatory, luteal. These phases are named based on the changes that takes place in each stage. So the first one is menstrual phase. Menstrual flow, it lasts for 3 to 5 days. So menstrual flow is nothing but the menses starts for 3 to 5 and continues for 5 days. So why it occurs? Why it occurs? Because the uterus is lined by endometrium, or you can say the lining of the uterus is called as endometrium. That lining breaks down and the blood vessels also along with that blood vessels. So because of that, this menstrual flow occurs. So what helps in this process, and one more thing what happens during this process is decline in the level of progesterone and estrogen, that is decrease in the level of progesterone and estrogen. So why menstrual flow occurs is because of the breakdown of the endometrial lining of the uterus. So you can see in this diagram, so this is what is called as endometrium. This is the uterus region. So this lining, what is shown in red color, that is what is the endometrial lining. This endometrial lining will be broken down, and as well as the blood vessels also will be degenerated along with that. So because of this process, what happens is menstrual flow occurs. So as the same way, decline in the level of progesterone and estrogen also occurs. So when it occurs is when released ovum is not fertilized. So when the ovum is fertilized by sperm, the further changes takes place and implantation occurs in the uterus. But when it does not occur, when the released ovum is not fertilized, what happens is this menstrual flow occurs. Next one, when menstruation does not occur is either when the female is pregnant, that is during pregnancy, or when the normal female undergoes high level of stress, or if there is any hormonal disorder, or if that particular female has anemia, there will be absence of menstruation. So absence of menstruation occurs either during pregnancy. It is not necessary. If the menstruation fails, it is only because of pregnancy. It may be also due to stress, hormonal disorder or anemia. Next one, or the next phase is called as follicular or proliferative phase. So it starts from the 5th day of the cycle. So we said that menstrual phase is 3rd to 5 days, and then the 5th day follicular or the proliferative phase starts. So what are the changes that takes place during this follicular phases? First one, the primary follicle. You can see in this diagram, this is what is called as primary follicle. This primary follicle, actually this follicle contains the egg. So this primary follicle slowly matures and then it becomes a mature follicle called as Graafian follicle. So this is one process. Simultaneously what happens is the endometrium regenerates. So the endometrium, the first phase we have seen the endometrium breaks down, or blood vessels along the endometrial lining breaks down. So because of that only menstrual flow occurs. Now slowly what happens is regenerates. So regeneration already you have read in the first lesson. So there we have read reparative regeneration, particular tissue again regenerates. The same process only occurs here. So endometrium regenerates. So what are the hormones that are responsible for this process is gonadotropins. Gonadotropins are those hormones which are secreted from the pituitary gland. So FSH and LH. FSH and LH are a follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. These two hormones are responsible for these changes that occurs in the ovary and in the uterus. So this primary follicle into Graafian follicle, that takes place in the ovary. Endometrium regeneration takes place in the uterus. So next one, we are going to see what are the function of these hormones FSH and LH. First one, it stimulates follicular development. So for this development of the follicle, which is required is this FSH and LH. Next one, for the secretion of estrogen by follicle cells. So if this follicle cells, if this estrogen has to be secreted by the follicle cells, then the gonadotropins like FSH and LH are very essential. Next one is called as ovulatory phase. Ovulatory phase is the 3rd phase. From the name itself, it's very clear, that is the ovulation occurs. So during this phase, LH and FSH will be in the peak level. So this phase usually occurs about 14th day, that is in the middle of the cycle. Middle of the cycle means 28 is divided into 14 plus 14. So you can say the middle of the phase, that is what called ovulatory phase. Here ovulation occurs. So which will be in the peak level is LH. So that is why it is called as LH surge. So LH, that is luteinizing hormone, will be in the peak. So it induces rupture of the Graafian follicle. So induces rupture means the breakdown of the Graafian follicle. Now we have seen that the follicle develops into a mature Graafian follicle. This Graafian follicle later ruptures or breaks and releases the ova or the ovum which is present inside. So the ovum is released. Now this process only is called as ovulation, and this phase is called as ovulatory phase. Next one is called as luteal phase or secretory phase. So we have read that Graafian follicle is formed, then Graafian follicle releases the ovum. So this is over now. Now the ovum is released. Now what happens is this Graafian follicle, after the release of ovum, the remaining part of the Graafian follicle gets converted into endocrine gland. That is why it is called as transitory endocrine gland. And now it is called as corpus luteum. The Graafian follicle which remains after the release of ova is called as corpus luteum. It acts as an endocrine gland secreting large amount of progesterone. So you know the function of endocrine gland is to secrete hormone. So what hormone is secreted by corpus luteum is progesterone. What is corpus luteum? Corpus luteum is nothing but the Graafian follicle. So here we have seen after the release of the ova, the remaining part of the Graafian follicle will get converted into corpus luteum. So now at the same time what happens is this progesterone, I told you corpus luteum helps in the production of large amount of progesterone. What is the need of this progesterone is to maintain the endometrium. So endometrium is the lining of uterus. So for that regeneration process of endometrium, this corpus luteum secretes progesterone. Then fertilization. If fertilization occurs, implantation of ovum takes place. That is, if the Graafian follicle releases the ovum, if the ovum gets fertilized, the next process is, after certain changes, what happens is implantation of the ovum occurs. Where implantation occurs is in the uterine wall. So after that implantation process, what happens is the uterine wall will start secreting nutritious fluid, and that is why it is called as secretory phase. So if the fertilization does not occur, that is, the released ova is not fertilized by sperm, that is, in the absence of fertilization, what will happen is this corpus luteum degenerates and then it gets converted into scar tissue, and then it is called as corpus albicans. Now corpus luteum, after degenerating, it becomes corpus albicans. So this corpus albicans, after this disintegration of endometrium occurs, and then again menstruation is followed. So if the ovum is implanted, then the uterine wall starts secreting the nutritious fluid and secretory phase, and that is why it is called a secretory phase, and then the development of the fetus occur. But in other way, if fertilization does not occur, the corpus luteum gets degenerated and it becomes a scar tissue called as corpus albicans, and then again further the first change what we seen in the uterus, that is disintegration of the endometrium occurs, and then it leads to menstruation. So these all changes takes place within 28 days. That is why we say that 28 or 29 days, that is why it is called a cyclic menstruation. So next one, if you see, we are going to see in this diagram what are the different phases of menstrual cycle. So here the first diagram, if you see, FSH and LH. So LH that pink line denotes FSH and the blue line denotes LH. You can see LH is in the peak level in the middle, that is in the 14th day. So here it reaches the peak level. So here you can see hormone levels. So next one, if you see, ovarian events. So what are the events that take place in the ovary? Development of follicle. The follicle become mature. Then after maturation, ovulation takes place, that is release of ovum. Then corpus luteum. After that, the Graafian follicle becomes corpus luteum. And if implantation occurs, what happens is it again continues the process. If it does not get fertilized, it gets regeneration of the corpus luteum occurs, it turns into corpus albicans. And then menstruation is followed. Next is ovarian hormone levels. Ovarian hormones are estrogen and progesterone. So you can see the blue line denotes the estrogen level and the pink line denotes the progesterone level. So how the level of the hormones are, you can see here. And next one, if you see, the endometrium. How the endometrium is. So what are the changes that takes place in the uterus? You can see during the menstrual cycle, this is in the first phase, you can see the level of endometrium is very low. So next one, in the follicular phase, it slowly rises, that's slowly it is building up. And then if you see, it started regenerated, it is completely regenerated. And then again slowly, if you see at the end of 28, again the cycle commences. So the next cycle begins. So again you can see the endometrium goes down. So this is how the menstrual cycle occurs. So here I have mentioned everything in the tabular column. This is there in the 10th standard book also. If you want, you can, that is all those stages whatever I explained so far is given here as a tabular column. So this will be easy for you to read. So next one is menstrual hygiene. So what is menstrual hygiene, or why menstrual hygiene is important is, menstrual hygiene, what is menstrual hygiene is, what are the hygienic practices we follow during the menstrual cycle. That is what is called as menstrual hygiene, or during the menstrual phase. What are the hygienic practices we follow, that is what is called as menstrual hygiene. Why is that very important is for good health. That is very important for good health. Next one, for our own well-being, to maintain a dignity, that is for a self-respect. Next, for empowerment, to gain confidence, to have a strength. So that is for empowerment. And next one, for productivity in the sense giving birth to young ones. So if there is a poor menstrual hygiene, what will happen is it leads to stress, fear and embarrassment, absenteeism from school. So these all problem occurs when there is a poor menstrual hygiene. What are the materials that can be used during this menstrual phase is absorbable clothing materials, sanitary napkins, pads, tampons and menstrual cups. So these are all some of the materials that can be used for a healthy menstrual hygiene. Next one is protection. So changing these materials for 4 to 5 hours, that is depending upon the menstrual flow, is very important. Next one, how to dispose the materials we use is, first one, wrap it in a paper and throw it in a place where it is not exposed outside. Next, it should not be thrown in open areas. Next one is not flushing napkins in drain pipe of toilets. So what happens is it causes choking of the toilets. So it should not be flushed into the drain pipes. Then using incinerators is the best method. So we know nowadays in all schools and colleges they use incinerators for burning the napkins. Next one is menopause. Menopause is the phase in women's life when ovulation and menstruation stops. So the production of ova from the ovary stops. That process is called as menopause. So that is what is called as menopause. So average age time, if you see, it occurs from 45 to 50 years. So it indicates primary functions of the ovary stops. So the primary function, whatever the function is carried out by the important function carried out by the ovary, stops at the age of 45 to 50 years. And we call it as menstruation stops or menopause. So during this menopause, the female body shows certain symptoms. So we are going to see what are the symptoms shown during the period of menopause. First one is anxiety, depression, headache, decreased libido, that is sexual desire. Next, fatigue, that is weakness, insomnia, that is sleeplessness, vaginal dryness. Then memory lapses, that is loss of memory, loss of memory not completely, very slow memory. Then osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is the bones become weak or pores in the bone. Then gaining weight, irritability. Then hot flashes. Hot flashes means sudden rise in temperature. And these are some of the symptoms. Not only these, there are many symptoms that are shown in the female body during menopause, but these are few of these symptoms I have mentioned. Next topic is fertilization and implantation. Before that, so we'll recapitulate once again all those cycles. So what are those cycles we have seen is 4 cycles. What are those 4 cycles is? First one is menstrual phase, follicular phase, ovulatory phase, luteal phase. So menstrual phase occurs within 4 to 5 days. That is, it occurs for 4 to 5 days. Follicular phase is from 5th day to 13th day. Ovulatory phase 14th day. Luteal phase 15th to 28th day. So what are the changes that occur in ovary and uterus? If you see, during the menstrual phase, development of primary follicles occur. Then breakdown of uterine endometrial lining leads to bleeding. Hormonal changes, if you see, decrease in progesterone and estrogen. Here 6th to 13th day, what are the changes that takes place is, in the ovary, primary follicles grow to become a fully mature Graafian follicle. Endometrium regenerates through proliferation. Here regenerates through proliferation means the cell divides rapidly and normal endometrium or the endometrial lining is seen. So FSH and estrogen increases here. Next, ovulatory phase is 14th day. The Graafian follicle ruptures and releases the ovum. Here increase in endometrial thickness. The thickness of the endometrium increases, which will be in the peak is LH, that is luteinizing hormone. Luteal phase 15th to 28th day, emptied Graafian follicle develops into corpus luteum. Endometrium is prepared for implantation. If fertilization of egg takes place, if fertilization does not occur, corpus luteum degenerates, uterine wall ruptures, bleeding starts and unfertilized egg is expelled. So both are explained here. What happens if fertilization occurs? What happens if fertilization does not occur? So hormonal changes, LH and FSH decrease. Corpus luteum produces progesterone and its level increases, followed by a decline if menstrual bleeding occurs. So these are all those 4 phases we have seen so far.